Good evening, and welcome to the public hearing on behalf of the Alabama Department of Environmental Management. My name is Mary Frank Brown. I am the designated hearing officer for these proceedings. The role of the hearing officer is limited to ensuring an orderly hearing so that an accurate record of this hearing may be developed for the department's evaluation. I do not make any decisions regarding these proposed permit actions. On behalf of the department, we anticipate your participation in tonight's hearing for the following proposed permit actions for Alabama Power Company's EC Gaston Electric Generating Ash Pond and Gypsum Pond, located near 31972 Highway 25, Wilsonville, Alabama, 35189. The proposed initial issuance of a coal combustion residuals CCR permit number 59-16 to close the plant Gaston Ash Pond and to operate the plant Gaston Gypsum Pond. The purpose of this hearing is to provide the public with an opportunity to present oral testimony on the proposed permit action. In addition to oral testimony, the department also will consider all written comments submitted before the close of the public comment period. The department has requested your comment, and we anticipate you taking the time to make them known to us. On February 19th, 2021, notice of the date, time, place, and purpose of this hearing was posted on the department's website and published in the Birmingham News and published in the Shelby County Reporter on February 21st, 2021. In addition, the department sent notice of this hearing by email to individuals and organizations who had previously requested advance notice of permit proceedings. A copy of the notice and the email distribution list will be entered into the record of these proceedings. Copies of the public notice, permit application, preliminary determination, and draft permit have been made available for inspection by the public at the office of the department at 1400 Coliseum Boulevard in Montgomery, as well as on the department's website. The hearing is open to the public, and anyone wishing to present oral testimony or submit a written statement may do so. Lengthy statements or those containing considerable technical or other complex data should be submitted in writing. Summaries of such statements may be presented orally. All testimony and written comments should be as factual as possible and should address the subject of this hearing. This hearing is an opportunity for members of the public to offer comments to help ensure that all relevant factors are considered before a final permit decision is made. Please be advised that the department is limited in the factors it can consider when making permit decisions and must base the determination only on whether the permit applicant has satisfied those requirements of applicable environmental statutes and regulations granted to ADM by the legislature. Persons giving testimony may be questioned by the hearing officer or other department staff to clarify points and to develop a better understanding of what is being presented. This proceeding tonight is not an open forum as in a question and answer session. This hearing is an opportunity for you to submit comments that you wish the department to consider in the final review of the permit application. However, you may pose a comment in the form of a question which will be compiled and addressed by the department in its completed response to comments. In addition to oral testimony, written comments may be submitted on the proposed permit actions. You do not have to make an oral statement tonight in order to have your written comment considered by the department. Written statements may be submitted to the hearing officer tonight or delivered to the department in Montgomery as directed in the public notice for this hearing. All written statements previously submitted and those received by the department before the end of the public comment period will be included in the hearing record. It is important to note that written comments submitted through postal or electronic mail are given the same consideration as those that are presented in person at this hearing. All oral and written testimony will be included in the hearing record. After giving full consideration to the hearing record, the department will make its final decision on the proposed permit action and develop responses to comments for the proposed permit. The hearing record, final permit determination, and response to comments will be posted to the department's e-file system. This hearing is being captured by a court reporter to develop a transcript of this hearing for review by the department. In addition, the entire proceeding is being recorded on video to be posted on the department's YouTube channel to make it accessible to the public. Now let us move on to the purpose of this hearing, the receipt of public comments. The order of appearance of persons giving testimony will be as follows. First, representatives of the department's land division, then a representative of Alabama Power Company, then any elected officials of their representatives who are pre-registered to speak. All remaining members of the public will be heard in the order in which they register during the pre-registration offered online or by telephone, and then those registered on site at this hearing. I now recognize Mr. Devin Jenkins to present a statement on behalf of the department's land division.
Good evening, my name is Devin Jenkins, and on behalf of the Alabama Department of Environmental Management, we thank you for your participating in the permit process for the EC Gaston Electric Generating Plant, Permit 59-16. Alabama Power Company has submitted to the Alabama Department of Environmental Management, or ADEM, an application for the initial issuance of a coal combustion residuals, or CCR permit, to close for the Plant Gaston Ash Pond and CCR permit to operate for the Plant Gaston Gypsum Pond at the EC Gaston Electric Generating Plant. The Plant Gaston Ash Pond is a CCR surface impoundment located in sections 5 and 6, Township 21 South, Range 2 East in Shelby County, Alabama, consisting of approximately 358.80 acres with a disposal area that consists of approximately 274.80 acres. The Plant Gaston Gypsum Pond is a CCR surface impoundment located in sections 29 and 32, Township 20 South, Range 2 East in Shelby County, Alabama, consisting of approximately 103.08 acres with a disposal area that consists of approximately 41.16 acres. The waste stream for the Plant Gaston Gypsum Pond would be CCR, including fly ash, bottom ash, boiler slag, and flue gas desulfurization materials generated from burning coal for the purpose of generating electricity. The service area for the Plant Gaston Gypsum Pond would be Alabama Power Company. The maximum average daily volume of waste disposed at the Plant Gaston Gypsum Pond would be 2,000 cubic yards per day. The proposed permit would require the permittee to manage CCR in accordance with the conditions of the proposed permit, ADEM Administrative Code Chapter 335-13-15, standards for the disposal of coal combustion residuals in landfills and surface impoundments, and the approved permit application. Groundwater monitoring and corrective action requirements in the proposed permit establish a groundwater monitoring system of wells that provide an accurate representation of the groundwater quality underlying the units, and a groundwater monitoring plan to establish appropriate sampling and analysis of the system to detect the presence of CCR constituents. For units where CCR constituents exceed acceptable levels, the proposed permit establishes corrective action requirements to remediate contamination caused by the units. Closure criteria in the proposed permit establish requirements for all units to close in accordance with specified standards and timeframes. Post-closure criteria in the proposed permit require each unit be maintained for a period of time after closure, including maintaining groundwater monitoring and corrective action to ensure the long-term safety of units that are closing. Operating criteria in the proposed permit establish requirements for the disposal of CCR in all units approved to accept waste, including the allowable waste streams and daily volumes permitted to be disposed of, plans to control fugitive dust and inflow design flows, and inspection requirements. The permittee must comply with all conditions in the proposed permit, except to the extent and for the duration such noncompliance is authorized by a variance granted by ADEM. The first variance requests to exclude boron as an Appendix 4 assessment monitoring constituent. The second variance requests groundwater protection standards of 6 micrograms per liter for cobalt, 15 micrograms per liter for lead, 40 micrograms per liter for lithium, and 100 micrograms per liter for molybdenum. The third variance requests the final grade of the cover system be less than 5% and greater than 25% as specified in the permit application for the plant Gaston ash pond. The fourth variance requests to remove the requirement of a 100-foot buffer from the perimeter of the facility boundary for the plant Gaston ash pond. Based on our review of the initial permit application, the department has made a preliminary determination that the proposed facility would be in compliance with the applicable state and federal solid waste disposal requirements and thus protective of public health and the environment. The proposed permit includes the following conditions. 1. Upon renewal, the permit would be valid for a 10-year period. 2. The permittee would conduct groundwater monitoring semi-annually. 3. The permittee would implement and maintain a corrective action program. 4. The permittee would maintain the integrity of the final cover system throughout the life of the permit and post-closure period. 5. The permittee would at all times properly maintain the facility and all systems in accordance with the application and the permit. 6. The permittee would obtain the approval of ADEM for any change or modification to the facility or a system which might otherwise result in non-compliance with the permit or ADEM's administrative code. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to provide an opportunity to receive public comment regarding the application and proposed permit. The department welcomes your input to this process and will consider all technical comments prior to making a final decision concerning the issuance of this permit and will develop a response to comments which will become part of the public record and be posted to the department's e-file system. Thank you again for participating in this hearing.
Thank you. We will now proceed to the receipt of public comments from a representative of the permit applicant. Since there is no representative here for the permit applicant, we will now move to proceed of the receipt of public comments from elected officials. Since there are none here, we will now we'll now proceed to the receipt of comments from members of the public. As indicated in the public notice for this hearing, oral testimony for each registered speaker is limited to 7 minutes. If anyone has prepared a statement that cannot be presented in a 7-minute time frame. Please use your time for oral testimony to summarize your comments and submit your full statement to the department in writing for placement in the record. I'll first recognize Justin Overton. Please step up to the mic and clearly restate your name and the name of any interest or organization you represent. Please speak clearly into the mic to ensure an accurate record of your testimony can be recorded. Please also remember that this is not a question and answer. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Justin Overton, and I am the staff Riverkeeper and Executive Director at CCR Riverkeeper. Our mission is to protect, restore, and promote the Coosa River and its tributaries in Alabama. I'm here tonight to voice concerns on behalf of the river, wildlife, and our thousands of members. All comments and concern reference the coal combustion residual permit to close the plant Gaston Ash Pond at the Gaston Steam Plant, permit number 59-16. The Gaston Ash Pond sits on the banks of Lay Lake on the Coosa River. Lay Lake is heavily used for recreation, fishing tournaments, and industry. Bass tournaments are an important component of the economy and boosting tourism in the area. Protecting Lay Lake as an economic engine, environmental treasure, and public drinking water supply is of the utmost importance. Since the news of groundwater contamination at all of Alabama's coal ash ponds in 2018, citizens have loudly expressed their disgust for Alabama Power's rationale that leaving their leaking toxic coal ash ponds on our rivers is the only option to deal with coal ash. CCR Riverkeeper wants to know, why hasn't Alabama Power been required to present a formal alternatives analysis? The irony is that Alabama Power created this problem when they began disposing of highly toxic waste in unlined pits right next to Alabama's waterways in order to save money. But the public will ultimately pay the price for this pollution and public health hazard. The utility claims there isn't an easy or cheap fix for this big-time problem, but there is a well-established, straightforward fix for Alabama's coal ash problem, one that's been implemented and is currently taking place right now in North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and Georgia, and will soon be in Tennessee: the excavation and removal of coal ash to modern line landfills away from water. The removal of this ash is the only proven long-term solution that we know will protect the Coosa River, local drinking water supply, and the families who fish, swim, and boat along this iconic waterway, as well as the businesses and communities that rely on clean water. Regardless of the legal requirements in this permit to close the Gaston coal ash pond, nothing changes the facts. The pond, like all the others, is leaking. Allowing Alabama Power to threaten the way of life around here by leaving this toxic waste behind on Lay Lake is irresponsible and contradicts ADEM's own use classification of this section of the lake. The Gaston coal ash pond on Neely Henry Lake was the first to close in Alabama. The facility's closure process and self-reported ongoing groundwater monitoring violations proves that cap in place does not work and is not a safe option for disposing of coal ash. According to Alabama Power's most recent groundwater report from January of 2021, a monitoring well at the Gaston Pond had arsenic values that were as much as 72 times the groundwater protection standards. Alabama Power seems to be taking the approach that they're going to close the site regardless of whether it controls the spread of contaminants. It is unclear at best when actual groundwater remediation will take place. The ash-contaminated groundwater has historically flowed in all directions away from the ash impoundment, and no groundwater flow or transportation modeling of the site has been deployed to evaluate the effects of capping this toxic waste in place. Dewatering the coal ash pond does not make the groundwater violations go away. Even where dilution is the solution to Alabama Power's pollution, CCR contaminants can accumulate in sediments, impacting local wildlife and fisheries. Furthermore, Alabama has no laws or regulation on the books, and specifically to ensure the safety of the state's coal ash dams. We're the only state without these laws requiring state officials to inspect and guarantee dams are operating properly. The draft permit proposed to control filtration for 100 years, but the post-closure plan is for only 30 years. The permit needs to identify who will be responsible in 2050 and set aside dedicated funding for monitoring, maintenance, and cap replacement. It's important to note that there has been no modeling reported that evaluates the volume of water that can be expected to infiltrate the covered coal ash pond by lateral flow, infiltration through the cap, or upward flow. Alabama Power is asking for some variances in their permit, so we consulted a PhD in toxicology about these variances, and here's what we've learned. The lead variance that Alabama Power is requesting in this permit is 15 micrograms per liter, which is the maximum contaminant level that the EPA permits in drinking water. But of course, no amount of lead is truly safe. Alabama Power's data already shows astronomically high lithium measurements. According to the USGS, lithium should be less than 10 micrograms per liter, yet Alabama Power wants 40 micrograms per liter, 4 times the maximum safe amount. USGS recommends the consumption not exceed 60 micrograms per liter, which is unlikely to be limited if reaching 40 micrograms per liter in the water supply alone. The drinking water standard set for the health of molybdenum at 80 micrograms per liter, but the toxicologists recommend the threshold be set at 50 micrograms per liter. Either way, 100 micrograms per liter Alabama Power requests is much higher than experts recommend. If Alabama Power is allowed to leave their toxic coal ash on the banks of the Coosa River, they are not just jeopardizing public health or the river, while ensuring pollution for years to come. They're jeopardizing with a local way of life for citizens that revolves around the lake. We implore ADEM to fulfill their stated mission of assuring the citizens of Alabama a safe, healthful, and productive environment, and make Alabama Power move their toxic coal ash off our river to an upland-lined, dry landfill rather than leaving it to pollute in perpetuity. Don't let Alabama Power make the citizens of Alabama and ADEM be a butt of an April Fool's joke. Enforce the law, make the utility clean up this site, and move this ash away from the river. Thank you.
Thank you. I next recognize Church Graham. Church Graham. If you will, please step up to the microphone and clearly state your name and the name of your interested organization that you represent. Please speak clearly into the mic to ensure an accurate record of your testimony can be recorded. Please also remember that this is not a question and answer session. Thank you.
May I? Chuck Graham, here on behalf of Coosa Riverkeeper. And I can take my mask off?
Yes, sir,
okay,
if you want to.
Thank you. I brought a copy also. Good evening. My name is Chuck Graham. I grew up in Talladega, currently reside in Shelby County. I'm an avid angler, outdoorsman, and father of 2 who spends countless hours in and around the Coosa River. As a resident of Alabama for the past 45 years, I'm extremely aware and proud of what makes Alabama special. Our people, the wide variety of physiological regions, our unique biodiversity, and our greatest resource, our rivers. I look at you today and I see a group that is funded for the task of protecting what makes Alabama great, as well as protecting me and my family. I also see a group that has multiple entities in its ear, such as large corporations, special interest groups, concerned citizens, and environmental organizations. For this reason, I do not envy your position or your task. Your task is to approve or deny the permits that allow Alabama Power to keep dangerous, toxic coal ash on the banks of the Coosa River. Your approval of this permit will not only have a detrimental impact on the community from an environmental and economic impact, but on the very health of the citizens and the wildlife that rely on the Coosa River. Therefore, your approval of this permit will directly contradict the mission of the Alabama Department of Environmental Management, which is to provide all citizens of the state a safe, helpful, and productive environment. Over the past year, we have seen the Coosa River be the refuge for those struggling with the horrible pandemic. Not only for the refuge, but in many cases to provide sustenance and meals for their families. My hope for you as you discuss these permits is simple. Apply logic to your very own mission statement. Allow me to define logic. A science that deals with the principles of criteria, of validity, of inference and demonstration, and the science of formal principles of reasoning. Second definition, something that forces a decision apart from or in opposition to reason. Logic should tell that if Southern Company and other energy companies have moved the coal ash in other states, that moving the coal ash in Alabama would also be wise and be warranted. Logic should clearly tell you that the storage of harmful chemicals such as arsenic, mercury, selenium, and cadmium a few yards from the Coosa River is an incredible and unneeded risk. Logic would also tell that the existence of the Alabama Power Emergency Action Plan for coal ash proves that even the slightest leak is in fact an emergency. Logic would also tell that if Alabama Power has a list of possible emergencies, such as discharge structure flow, embankment overtapping, seepage, dropouts, embankment cracking, embankment movement, earthquakes, security threats, sabotage, and vandalism, the evidence is obviously real, and the emergency is obviously real. I would like to close with two comments. As difficult as the past 12 months have been on all of us, there are some lessons to be learned. Our very livelihood is so very fragile, and risk to our livelihood should be taken seriously. Risk avoidance should be practiced when feasible, and in this scenario that faces you, risk avoidance is very, very feasible. The families and the communities within the Coosa River Basin deserve better. Anything short of denying permits that allow Alabama Power to maintain the coal ash along the river is a violent statement that we are somehow less than, and that your decision is void of logic in place of money and politics. Thank you.
Thank you. I next will recognize Patrick Cagle. Good evening. Please step up to the mic and clearly state your name, the name of any interest or organizations that you represent. Please speak clearly into the mic to ensure an accurate record of your testimony can be recorded. Please also remember that this is not a question and answer session. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you. My name is Patrick Cagle. I'm president of the Alabama Mining Association. The Alabama Mining Association supports ADEM's draft permit for the safe closing and capping in place of the CCR impoundment located here at Plant Gaston. Our association supports this permit because an Alabama Power's closure plan because we're confident that it will protect both human health and the environment. Most of my comments are based on the fact that Alabama Power has followed each and every rule established by EPA and ADEM for the closure of a CCR impoundment. Businesses like the mining companies I represent can and will follow strict and complex and costly environmental regulations in order to protect human health and our natural resources. Day in and day out, regulated businesses abide by each and every rule established by EPA and ADEM. So it's essential that the regulated business be provided with regulatory certainty when they follow the rules. What businesses cannot do is, of all sizes, cannot afford to have the rules changed and the goalposts moved. And we believe it's essential that, for all businesses, that anyone that follows the rules not be penalized for doing so. And they've received the regulatory certainty to know that if you follow the rules, you are able to comply. Tonight's public hearing marks a milestone in a decades-long process to end the antiquated storage of coal ash in an open impoundment. The rules used to develop the plan for closing Plant Gaston CCR impoundment were developed by EPA under the Obama administration and were left largely unchanged by President Trump's EPA. I think that bears repeating that the EPA under both President Obama and President Trump have agreed that closing and sealing a CCR impoundment in place is safe and effective. The arguments being made tonight by environmental groups are not new. These groups made the same arguments to the EPA when the federal CCR rules were proposed. President Obama's own EPA soundly rejected each of these same arguments. In addition to my professional interest in this issue, I also have a personal one. I have a passion for the outdoors. I enjoy, our state's lakes and rivers and the Gulf, and I'm looking forward to the day that I can share my passion of the water and recreating on the water, fishing with my 4-year-old son. I wouldn't support any permit for closure in place if I thought it would be a risk to our state's natural resources. The real risk to our state is delaying action. The sooner work begins to close in place the Plant Gaston CCR impoundment, the sooner the risk of an unlikely but catastrophic failure like that experienced in Kingston, Tennessee becomes impossible once water is removed. The unlikely risk of inundation becomes a near zero risk. Finally, I want to thank ADEM for holding this, for making arrangements to do this during the pandemic, and just reiterate that the Alabama Mining Association supports this, and we strongly encourage that the permit be issued without any delay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll next recognize John Hale. Please step up to the microphone and clearly state your name and the name of any interest or organization that you represent. Please speak clearly into the microphone to ensure an accurate record of your testimony can be recorded. Please also remember that this is not a question and answer session, and you may begin when you're ready.
I brought comments also, so I'll submit those when I'm done.
Yes, sir.
My name's Jonathan Hale. I'm the CEO of Prospect Mining and also the chairman of Alabama Mining Association. I am in favor of Alabama's power plan for their CCR permit to close their ash pond in place and on site. Environmental advocacy groups will have you to believe there is only one safe and legal way to remove a coal ash pond. Dig it all up and remove it to a landfill miles and miles away. Facts are often overlooked with these groups. It is my understanding, according to the EPA, there are two ways for coal ash pond sites to be closed: on site or removal from the site. President Obama's EPA approved these two methods in 2015. The EPA left that decision to the facility to come up with a sound engineering plan. ADEM, of course, will evaluate the plan and approve or deny the permit to Alabama Power. Every coal ash closure site in the U.S. has its own site-specific geology, whether it is on site or any site that the coal ash is to be removed to. Each site to be closed must be evaluated by the facility to determine the safest way to close the ash pond, and also take into account the surrounding communities on which such closure will have on them. Alabama Power has spent years determining which way is the safest way to close this ash site down. The EPA says that both methods are safe as long as they use sound engineering methods and can be equally protective of the environment. In their plan, they will remove the water, they will excavate and reduce the amount of ash that's in the existing pond, add additional protection, and then there will be permanent closure of that pond and ongoing monitoring. I took that straight off their site, and that's That was their plan on their site. In either method of closure, there is no difference in protecting the groundwater on-site or off-site. Alabama Power will have to follow the plan that is approved in the permit, whether it is on-site or 300 miles away. Alabama Power has spent countless engineering hours evaluating the site and has come up with a sound plan as outlined above that ADEM can approve for their on-site closure. It comes down to the safety of the communities in which we live in. Anytime you add additional trucks or cars in the traffic throughout the communities, then there is a risk to public safety. Other risks are trucks spilling their loads on the public roads and waterways. It is my understanding that it will take around 200 truckloads per day for 15 years to remove this coash from this pond. To me, that is an unneeded risk to the public and to the environment when you have a different option to safely dispose of the coash on site and still protect the groundwater and the environment, which is what we all want to do. Might also add the wear and tear on Alabama's public highways by adding this many trucks daily, another cost to the Alabama taxpayer. In closing, I for one will always be in favor of safe engineering practices to solve any problem before us. I will not be in favor of something because some environmental group wants to make it as expensive as possible to the facility to operate the coal-fired units, which is the real reason here. Make no mistake, this is only one part of the strategy of what the environmental groups want for their final goal, and that is to ultimately shut down all coal-fired units by whatever methods possible. Actions always have consequences, whether it is positive or negative. If you do not approve this permit, then there will be negative consequences for years by your all's decisions. If we have not learned anything during the freezing weather in Texas this year, then you should know one thing, and that is coal can provide a reliable source to our electric grid no matter what the weather is doing. Coal is a cheap source of power and can safely be burned to provide reliability to the grid, and byproducts can be disposed of in a safe and responsible way as not to harm the environment. President Biden said last night that he wants to invest into the electric grid of the U.S. However, this administration does not have coal as a source into their equation. This is a mistake, and Alabama should not follow other states like California and Texas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll now recognize Karen Jensen. If you will, please step up to the microphone. Clearly state your name and the name of any interest or organization that you represent. Please speak clearly into the microphone to ensure an accurate record of your testimony can be recorded. Please also remember that this is not a question or answer session, and you may begin when you would like.
Okay. My name is Karen Jensen. I am the Vice President of the Lay Lake Homeowners and Boat Owners Association called Lay Lake Hobo. Been a founding member for 22 years here, and we have participated every year until the pandemic, of course, in a cleanup where we go out in pontoons and kayaks and pick up trash and take it to waiting dumpsters in Shelby County and Talladega County. There are 3 other counties that participate as well. And then the dumpsters are weighed before and after, and each year we report how much tonnage we've picked up. And I think let's see, well, anyway, about 5 years ago, we picked up 9.2 tons of trash, and 2 years after that, we picked up like almost 20 tons of trash. So obviously it varies a whole lot. But the whole point is that that's just trash. And Alabama Power would send out a barge with GPS coordinates so that we could get to other, big items, not trees, but big items like tires and sailboats and craziness like that. And all this time that we've been doing this, we were not aware ever that until the self-reporting of Alabama Power that the leakage from the coal ash plants, which of course are old and obsolete, are leaking arsenic, lead, and mercury. And that's kind of a shocking thing for citizens to understand. A week and a half ago, I gave a program to Culture Club here in Columbiana, maybe 18 women, explaining the whole history of the lake and what we have done with Hobo and other groups and the leakage that's now occurring. And so I've got on my skeleton outfit to show the effects of the intake of all these terrible things that are leaking down to our groundwater. Here in Columbiana, we rely on 5 wells, and of course, with the leakage going down, it's going to hit the groundwater. The other 3 states nearby, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia, have all agreed to move the unlined, obsolete pits to higher ground, away from water sources, which is absolutely wonderful, but it's not happening here. We would like Alabama Power to be good neighbors, conscientious neighbors, and be concerned about our children, our grandchildren, and the safety of the water here. It would be sad to see this area become another Flint, Michigan, where children are poisoned by lead. One of the examples I like to give is that my husband used Roundup to spray the violets in our yard because he thought that was offensive. And of course, I make smoothies with healthy things. Healthy things like spinach and avocado, banana, because I have arthritis, or I did have it before we switched to this crazy diet. And I would throw violets in there, because they're nutritious, and they had Roundup in them. So I've been telling him that all these wrinkles that you see are caused from drinking Roundup. But imagine, he's since given it up, but imagine drinking smoothies, which apparently is going to be our future, with arsenic, lead, and mercury. Holy mackerel. That's really, really bad and really, really dangerous. So that would not be a good thing. At the end of my talk, and I realized that Alabama Power is willing to put a cap on this situation, and they're unwilling to move the pits. So what I told the ladies in Columbiana is that if you were leaking, really leaking, I'm talking like leaking, and like urine, would the solution be to put a hat on? Really? I mean, this is insane. So I hope that the situation will be rethought and that Alabama Power will become a conscientious neighbor, that they will think of the population here rather than maybe shareholders. Instead of the profit line, we need to think about the people and the water source. And again, we have all kinds of we're dependent on wells, and even the fancy new building over there on 145, the new treatment plant, is only, they're taking water out of Lay Lake, which of course is only 100 feet from these pits. So obviously they're in a very dangerous place, and our water can all be contaminated. So my hope and concern is that Alabama Power will pay attention to us, will consider our needs, and will not poison our drinking water. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll next recognize Blake Hardwick. If you'll please step up to the microphone, clearly state your name and the name of any interest or organization that you represent. Please speak clearly into the microphone to ensure an accurate record of your testimony can be recorded. Please also remember that this is not a question and answer session, and you may begin when you're ready.
Yes, ma'am. May I remove my mask?
Yes.
Thank you. I am Blake Hardwick, B-L-A-K-E, Hardwick, spelled a little funny, H-A-R-D-W-I-C-H. And I'm here tonight in the capacity of Executive Director of the Energy Institute of Alabama. Thank you for allowing me the availability and time to submit my comments tonight. The Energy Institute of Alabama is made up of 6 member companies: TVA, Power South, Alabama Power, the Alabama Rural Electric Cooperatives, Electric Cities of Alabama, and the Alabama Municipal Electric Authority. We were created in 2016 with a vision to take our research and research development assets and combine them with our natural resources to help strengthen the energy industry, protect our customers, meet demand, grow economic development, and push public policies that help create and continue to have safe, reliable, affordable, and clean energy. I mentioned with the plant berry comments that on Monday we released a series of studies that were created or that were commissioned back in 2020 by a group called Pila Geo-Environmental, who are located right here in Alabama, but both nationally and internationally recognized for their environmental services. They did a series of independent studies on all of the coal ash sites located here in Alabama, and I will address a few of the comments from the independent study on Plant Gaston. In compliance with EPA CCR rule and ADEM's requirement, Alabama Power Company has elected to close the ash pond by closure in place, and it's systematically addressing the performance standards and requirements of the regulations and the order. The federal and state rules allow for in-place closure of CCR impoundments by meeting certain requirements and performance standards as summarized. Control, minimize, or eliminate infiltration of liquids to and releases of CCR and contaminated runoff. Remove free liquids from CCR and stabilize. Install final cover system meeting design criteria. Maintain integrity and effectiveness of final cover system and monitor groundwater quality conditions. According to the independent study on Plant Gaston, safety inspections are conducted and observations documented on a prescribed basis by trained plant personnel and professional dam safety engineers at Alabama Power. The history of the construction of the existing impoundment, prepared and filed as a requirement of this facility's operating record, indicates that there are no known instances of structural instability at the impoundment. Alabama Power plans for closure in place at Plant Gaston include several things, but two of the items I will address is consolidation of CCR within the existing ash pond to reduce the footprint for in-place closure. Reduction of the ash footprint from approximately 270 acres to 193 acres, which is about 30% area reduction. Consolidation to include setbacks to the south, east, and west from original pond boundary ranging from about 350 feet to 1,000 feet to create buffers from the consolidated footprint. and also installation of a reinforced dike between the consolidated ash perimeter and the Coosa River for additional stability and flood protection. And a direct quote from the individual who headed this study stated, "The multi-component closure plan for Plant Gaston Ash Pond is comprehensive and robust and includes both physical and hydraulic engineered technologies to create source containment and redundant safety features and flood protection that have been designed to rigorously comply with and achieve the closure in place regulatory requirement." Thank you.
Thank you. I will now recognize Seth Hammett. If you will, please step up to the microphone. Clearly restate your name and the name of any interest or organizations that you represent. Please speak clearly into the microphone to ensure an accurate record of your testimony can be recorded. Please also remember that this is not a question and answer session, and you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon, and I'm glad to see we're a few minutes ahead of schedule. My name is Seth Hammett. I'm the chairman of the Energy Institute of Alabama. The Energy Institute of Alabama is comprised of 6 entities, all of which are involved in the generation, the transmission, or distribution of electricity. One of our members, the Alabama Power Company, is involved in all 3 of those. They generate, they transmit, and they distribute. Others, like the Tennessee Valley Authority, generate. Power South Energy, where I'm personally employed, also just generates electricity. So we're in the electricity business, and the Energy Institute represents that industry before groups such as this, members of the legislature, and the general public. I'm here tonight to ask your favorable consideration of the permit request for the cap in place procedure that Alabama Power Company has proposed and has the permit before you to accomplish. There's there's actually 4 points I'd make, and I'll make them pretty quickly. The first is it's legal. There are 2 ways you can take care of the coal ash. You can either transport it or you can cap it in place. That has been in place, as you all well know, for a long time. Matter of fact, dating back to the Obama administration. It's a safe way to take care of coal ash. The studies have shown that, both studies that Alabama Power Company has had, as well as studies by people like Lois George of the PELA organization. The third thing is it's common practice. There are those that would say and have you to believe that throughout the South, most people truck the coal ash away. It's not true. I'm sure you know 60% of the coal ash in the South is capped in place. And the final comment I'd make is that we're concerned as people that live in Alabama, and people that some of us have children and grandchildren here. So those of us that live and work here are concerned about the environment. And we would certainly not promote anything that we thought would be harmful to the environment and thus harmful to our families. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I next recognize E.L. McCarty III. If you'll please step up to the microphone and clearly restate your name and the name of any interest or organization that you represent. Please speak clearly into the microphone to ensure an accurate record of your testimony can be recorded. Please also remember that this is not a question and answer session, and you may begin when you're ready.
Is it okay if I take my mask off?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I can show you my COVID vaccination card if you want me to.
No, that's okay.
Because I actually have gotten both of them, so I feel like I'm probably okay to take my mask off. But anyway, so I have how many? I have 1 hour. Is that right?
7 minutes.
Oh, 7 minutes. I don't have 1 hour.
6:37 right now.
Okay. Well, 7 minutes. That's not quite enough time for what all needs to be said. I believe that if I ever decide to have a public hearing where I really don't want anybody to know anything, I'll have it in the middle of COVID, and I'll get ADM and Alabama Power to put it on for me. That way nobody will know anything about what's going on. That's kind of what you want, isn't it? This is very disappointing. This is not a public hearing. This is a ruse. This is a farce. I know there's going to be some people in here tonight saying, oh, we're killing jobs by trying to clean up down on the Coosa River. But it's going to create some jobs, all right? It's going to create some medical jobs. It's going to create some long-term health care jobs. It's going to create some mobility jobs, people building wheelchairs and roll-away beds and things like that for the people that are going to be poisoned by coal ash and all that stuff that's in it. All the 24 million tons of that stuff that is leaking vigorously as we speak today. Out of the 20 or so wells that have been dug, there's 5 of them that are just hot as a firecracker, leak all the time. All this great technology where they're going to cover this up and leave it in place. Please, somebody show me one, just one site where this has worked. Show me one, anywhere in the world where this has worked. Nobody even bothers. Well, we've got all this technology, we're going to cover this stuff up and it'll never leak again. No, it leaks every time. Gadsden, not Gaston, Gadsden is still leaking, even though this same technology was used there. What are we doing? Everybody in this room knows this is wrong. If you don't know this is wrong, you're not paying attention. We all know this is wrong. I wish the public was better engaged, better informed. If the public knew that Georgia was moving their coal ash that's in a similar situation to what's in Gaston, if they knew that the toxins leaching from the Gaston plant in Wilsonville, there's one that's 2,000% of the maximum contaminant level allowed. Who are we kidding here? I'm appalled at this. Oh well, thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, let me state, I don't think I ever told you, I'm Lee McCarty. I used to be mayor of Wilsonville. And so I'm real up on the topic of the people who get sick from that coal ash. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Next recognize Kathleen Kirkpatrick. Please step up to the microphone, clearly restate your name and the name of any interest or organization that you represent. Please speak clearly into the microphone to ensure an accurate record of your testimony can be recorded. Please also remember that this is not a question and answer session, and you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Kathleen Kirkpatrick. I'm here this evening representing Hometown Action. We are a statewide nonprofit grassroots organization with an interest in environmental, economic, and climate justice for the people, especially of Alabama's rural communities, much like right here in Shelby County. Rather than repeat what has already been said by others who will testify from Coosa Riverkeeper and the Southern Environmental Law Center, we're here to stand in solidarity with the opposition to capping these coal ash ponds in place. We are relying on them as watchdog organizations that have very thoroughly studied the situation to understand the science. But we do know that there are concerns and a high degree of risk to public health and to the environment, to the people of this community and all of those downstream in many communities where we have members and concerns. I had prepared another statement, but I was touched in driving up here from Montgomery this afternoon by the damage in this community from the recent storms. We can't ignore the impacts of fossil fuels on our communities and the effects of climate change on our communities in Alabama any longer. And we can't perpetuate that damage by allowing these fossil fuel residues to continue in our communities. The threats are only going to get worse. The heavy storm water and potential damage from storms. So leaving the coal ash in place poses an undue risk to people's health and to our fragile ecosystems that support our public health. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm going to keep it short. But I just really wanted to reemphasize that, I mean, this is not just about the environment, it's about people's health. And that's such a concern for many people in this area that rely on our river and on our air and all of the areas downstream that could be affected by release of this coal ash. It needs to be moved, not capped in place. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll next recognize Keith Johnson. Please step up to the microphone, clearly restate your name and the name of any interest or organization that you represent. Please speak clearly into the microphone to ensure an accurate record of your testimony can be recorded. Please also remember that this is not a question and answer session, and you may begin when you're ready.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for having me. My name is Keith Johnson. I'm the director of the Alabama office of the Southern Environmental Law Center. Thanks for the public meeting concerning the draft CCR permit for Plant Gaston. We're still in the process of reviewing the draft permit and supporting materials, and we will get you more thorough comments before the comment deadline. I want to start by talking about the location of Plant Gaston. Where it's currently located in the ash pond never should have been put where it is in the first place. For starters, it's 50 years old. It's in the middle of the town of Wilsonville, and it has residents backing up to the actual impoundment berms. No ash pond in Alabama that we're aware of is in such close proximity to the density of residences, especially when the impoundment contains over 24 million tons of toxic coal ash. Furthermore, the ash pond is right beside the Coosa River and Lay Lake, as you know, where many people swim, fish, and recreate. The ash pond also sits atop highly porous and soluble carbonated bedrock, a type of geology that is known to readily transmit contaminants and is subject to the formation of sinkholes. And as we know, the ash and gypsum ponds are currently contaminating groundwater with arsenic, lithium, molybdenum, radium, and other contaminants. We also know that groundwater flows radially from this site towards the residences and the Coosa River. And we know that Alabama Power plans to leave the coal ash in the groundwater in an unlined pit where it will continue to contaminate the state waters. Furthermore, We don't have, nor has Alabama Power provided, a true timeline of when this contamination would be remediated by the company's current closure plans. In addition to all this, there's a drinking water intake a few miles downstream on the Coosa River. So in short, Alabama Power has provided ADEM and the people of Wilsonville with an expedited closure plan that seeks to minimize the cost to the company while not taking care of the true source of contamination of the ash pond. Alabama Power's closure plans and ADEM's draft CCR permit will not contain or remediate the contamination that the Gaston ash pond has caused and continues to cause. This is no place for a permanent waste disposal facility that is unlined. Some specific deficiencies in the draft permit and the permit application are that it lacks sufficient analysis data and provisions in key areas such as the groundwater characterization and remediation. The draft permit also allows future groundwater degradation, future impoundment of leachate, and contamination of state waters by post-ash pond closure discharges. Capping the coal ash will not prevent groundwater contamination. The groundwater water table at Gaston is closely tied to the Coosa River and recharged by surrounding groundwater. We know that the coal ash will still sit in groundwater and continue to contaminate groundwater even under a cap under Alabama Power's current plans. We know that recharge to the groundwater will continue to flush contaminants into the groundwater and out into the surrounding environment. Groundwater will move through the site and infiltrate the ash from the sides and below. Even if the proposed cap has 0 defects and allowed no infiltration from directly over the top of the coal ash, which is highly unlikely for eternity, there will still be contaminants leaching from the coal ash into surrounding waters. In addition, nothing in the permit application nor the draft permit evaluates or requires an estimation of the volume of water that can be expected to infiltrate into the covered coal ash through the groundwater from the top, below, or the sides. A state CCR permit should not be issued until this information is provided by the company. In addition, we don't even know the true extent of the groundwater contamination. It has not been fully characterized in the permit application, nor is that required by the draft permit. For example, no soil borings have been located in the ash itself. Borings have been taken along the edges of the ash pond, but not in it, where we could get a better idea of the depth of the ash in the groundwater and the quality of the groundwater directly below the ash pond itself. There should be more borings to show the true extent of this contamination and how the current closure plans and draft permit will eventually affect the groundwater within, beneath, and down gradient of the ash pond. Preliminary analysis has shown high flow rates of groundwater into the Coosa River and Lay Lake. Groundwater flow and transport modeling to predict how groundwater flow directions will be altered by Alabama Power's plans and further predict how far down gradient water quality impacts may persist now into the future should be required in the permit application and draft CCR permit. We also don't have any idea from this permit application or the draft permit how much CCR contaminated groundwater has been transported and accumulated beyond the scope of the footprint of the ash pond. There is no investigation of that accumulation of CCR related contaminants outside the ash pond, and there is no plan for its remediation that we're aware of. A draft permit should not be issued until this information is provided. Alabama Power should also provide the public with information which compares alternative closure methods, such as extraction and removal, versus the current plans. There's no public information. There should also be some analysis of the contamination of which the gypsum pond may have been the source, separate and apart from the contamination caused by the ash pond. We know of SSIs exist for the current gypsum pond as well. In conclusion, this draft permit does not satisfy the requirements in the federal and state CCR rules. Discharges of contaminated water will persist, and ADEM should go back and require Alabama Power to provide information that shows the true extent of the contamination and how Alabama Power will solve this problem long term under the draft permit. Alabama Power plans to create an unlined dump next to the Coosa River and Lay Lake for eternity. The current plans do not remediate or control the company's current pollution. This facility violates the law now and will continue to do so under the draft permit proposed by ADEM. A final permit should not be issued until these issues are addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're not ready yet. Do you need to take a break?
Yeah, just like 3 minutes.
If we can take a 5-minute break for. I'll now recognize Dane Wilcox. Please step up to the microphone and clearly restate your name and the name of any interest or organization that you represent. Please speak clearly into the microphone to ensure an accurate record of your testimony can be recorded. Please also remember that this is not a question and answer session, and you may begin when you're ready.
Well, thank you. I'm David Wilcox. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Anyway, I've lived most of my adult life in Wilsonville, about a mile downgrade topographically and hydraulically from the steam plant. And my experience with Alabama Power is that they're good corporate citizens and that they generally do the right thing. And I'm very grateful they initially dammed up the river because it's a beautiful river, great fishing, and I'm very grateful that they supply us with the power. But I am a little concerned with their proposed closure alternative here, and it sounds like it's a cap in place, and I don't know whether this is similar to like a subtitle D landfill where you have double liner systems and leachate collection system between those two. I'm a little concerned it might be located in a 100-year floodplain. I'm concerned whether there's any type of infrastructures that are going to be constructed to prevent sloughing of the CCR waste into the Coosa River. You know, we all know what happened up at TVA in Tennessee. It sloughed in, and just kind of curious if there's going to be any type of dikes or you know, anything to prevent the flooding or the sloughing. You know, I know Alabama, when I last looked, I don't think there's any dam safety protocol in this state. I think, it's just kind of self-regulation here, so I'm a little concerned about that. And so if there is some type of infrastructure needed, dikes along the river to protect it from being washed away during a big flood, whether or not ADEM would be involved with that oversight. I'm also concerned whether the waste will actually be 10 foot above the seasonal high water table, and whether the lower part of the liner system, hopefully there is a liner system, would be above 10 feet above the seasonal high water table. Curious, I saw where they had a proposed groundwater treatment system. I don't know whether it's a system or remediation is just monitoring only and they're just going to put environmental covenants in place, or whether they're going to actually dewater and then treat that water. Was surprised to see the 15 micrograms per liter on the lead. I know historically it's usually 5. Micrograms per liter. I don't know whether that's been universally adopted. All remediation systems, if you can, they allow 15 micrograms per liter of lead, or whether or not that's just specifically for this closure plan. So I also have, let's see, normally I would file just a Freedom of Information request, but, in these days of COVID and whatnot, I would hesitate to go to ADEM. Normally this information is online. I'm hoping we get it posted online so, I can review like borehole depths, the depth of the waste material, perhaps look at some cross sections with the river or the groundwater flow direction, potential metric surface of both the upper flow system and the lower aquifer systems. I'm curious whether the site's going to be located in native material where there's underlying bedrock, or whether this is the closure system is going to be put into a simply alluvial from the river. I'm curious what happens to any waste. I suppose they're going to excavate, and again, I don't know. I don't know whether they're going to excavate all the waste and put it into one area and then cap it, or whether there's going to be any outlier areas that aren't just captured. I'm just curious whether there's been any cost comparisons between hauling it off and disposing of it, or whether or not they're just simply going to just decide closure in place. I mean, there's a lot of reputable companies out there that haul this type of material, and I know it's been done in most every other state, but I don't know why it's they're not really considering this, looking at this alternative, 1 mile upgraded from a house. Let's see, I'm sure I have some other questions. And I know this is more comments, but I have more questions than comments. But I'm a little concerned about remediation because of typically, heavy metals are difficult to remediate. If you have impacted groundwater, I'm curious whether there's any sentry wells in between the proposed closure site and the river that have been impacted. If there's any wells along the perimeter, I'm sure they've, have a good system of groundwater monitoring, and whether or not there's a vertical gradient, perhaps pushing these metal constituents deeper in the groundwater, and they're properly monitored with telescoping wells. So I have a lot of questions, and Devin, I guess you'll probably hear from me. I'll probably type a few up and get them to you, and would look to see your response. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
I'll next recognize Darrell Dewberry. Please step up to the microphone and clearly restate your name and the name of any interest or organization that you represent. Please speak clearly into the microphone to ensure an accurate record of your testimony can be recorded. Please also remember that this is not a question and answer session, and you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you. My name is Darryl, D-A-R-Y-L, middle initial H, Dewberry, D-E-W-B-E-R-R-Y. I've representing as a citizen, concerned citizen, over the energy cost that it would take to ship or haul coal ash. I'm a 45-year coal miner, retired. I was sunk the hard rock mines, the Jim Walter shafts, in the middle 70s. Deepest shafts on the northern continent, 2,350 foot deep. I also worked underground as an operator, continuous miner operator, various other things, shot fireman. As a result, I became local union president of Local 2397. From there, I went to the district and international. I retired as international vice president of the United Mile Workers, District 20, which covers the Southeast, as vice president. With that said, anything that drives the cost of energy up affects me personally, because I know that that cost is carried over to me. We've been successful in covering refuge piles for the coal industry for as long as I can remember. And I don't know why we can't, rather than try to truck it or something, and it would become somebody else's problem. Let's use common sense, cover it up like we do. The coal refuge, the facts that matter are is some of this stuff, well, it's not a hazardous waste first and foremost. But I'd like to, while I'm on my soapbox, I'd like to go ahead and state that there's nothing, no truth more obvious than without coal, there could not have been such marvelous social industrial progress as marks present day civilization. Coal has carried this nation through all the wars since the beginning of this nation and made possible the industrial might of this great nation. As I stand here, in 1978, we had 18,500 coal miners working. Now we're down to less than 2,000. And it just, the other nations, China's building coal-fired plants, and they don't have to answer to the refuge. And I know this is Alabama Department of Environmental Management. And I've called on y'all as chairman of the safety committee dealing with rock lock, isocyanates and such as that. And you've been a tremendous help. And I know that y'all are good stewards of this great state. But it's my advice and my position, after weighing all of it out, it would take years and years and years to truck it. And where are we going to truck it to? We're going to ship it out, let it be somebody else's problem. We've taken it, the old Concord mine, which come around at the turn of the century, and pumped refuge back in there. Put it back where it come from. And my recommendation would be that, I guess, and I don't know if I'm an opponent or a proponent, but I think it should be just dealt with like the refuge of a coal mine, covered up, reclaimed, and if there is a market, it goes well, the silica and the coal ash goes well in building components. It's a good conductor. And one of these days we're going to find out, somebody will uncover it and say, hey, we need that coal ash. There's another way. And we tried this at the U.S. Steel Concord plant. And that was to have granulated coal, which is more volatile than gunpowder, at the proper amount of when it's in the air. Anyway, we took and granulated coal, carried it to the steel mill, injected it with pure oxygen, and had a complete burn. The only problem was it was so volatile we had to purge the rail cars with pure nitrogen to get it out. I don't know if, but technology advances every day. I say cover it up instead of hauling it off, and that is my position. I'm also
one of the directors, board members on the Alabama State Port Authority as we speak. But with that said, my concerns are that the only thing this is going to do is drive energy up. The electric furnaces now will use so much they can't compete. It'll be devastating to this nation. We need to use good common sense, utilize what we've got, become completely energy independent, and you know, if anybody's got any questions, I'll answer them. But with that said, that's my position. I think that it would be an advantage and probably eliminate a lot of hazards, because if you're trucking or you're going to barge coal ash down the river to dispose of it, I don't know where you'd dispose of it. It just needs to be covered up and reclaimed, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all go home now, I think. Y'all have a blessed night.
Since there's no further registered speakers, please be advised that unless otherwise notified, the public comment period will end at 5:00 p.m. on Thursday, April 8, 2021. All comments must be received at the office of the department in Montgomery at that time. After consideration of all oral and written comments, the department will make its determination regarding the proposed permit action and prepare responses to all relevant comments received. Thank you for your participation this evening. This hearing is adjourned.